A lot of money was thrown around last offseason by NHL teams, some of it very good, some of it very bad. And while some of those deals could be judged pretty appropriately almost immediately, there were some that we had to wait a little bit to see how they would age. Now, it's only been a month into the season, but I do think that we have an opportunity to look at some of these deals that were signed in the offseason and assess which ones were great value for the teams that signed them and which ones are already aging pretty horribly. Here are the 5 best and 5 worst contracts that were signed this offseason. We'll kick things off with the bad and 2 contracts that, quite honestly, we all could have seen not turning out well when they were signed. That's the LA Kings, who added Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin to their defensive core, and so far they have lived up to that terrible billing. According to Hockey Statcars, Dumoulin and Ceci are the 2 worst skaters on the LA Kings thus far, and have accounted between them for half of the 10 worst individual game performances so far this year. And while we didn't expect either of them to bring much offensively, between them they only have 1 goal and 4 points on the season, they have also been just abjectly terrible in their own zone, and they're each making over $4 million for the next 2 years, CC 4.5 for the next 3. Another Ken Holland masterclass. Now, the 3rd worst signing from last offseason is a bit of an odd one because a lot of things have been going wrong for the Ottawa Senators, but I didn't think that their forward core was really one of them. But one of their big additions in the offseason, Fabian Zetterlund, has just flat out been a disappointment so far this year. Only 1 goal and 3 points this year. He's been a net negative player according to Hockey Statcars and has been especially bad offensively. It's even odder considering that after he came over to Ottawa last year, he had similar troubles scoring, putting up only 5 points in 20 games, but the Senators still gave him a pretty big extension of 3 years and almost $4 million. And that's a decent number for a guy who put up 44 and 41 points over the last 2 years respectively. He is clearly struggling to start this year. Now, in my opinion, the 2nd-worst contract that was signed over the offseason belongs to the New York Islanders, who, despite having a very impressive start to their season, made a big swing and a miss, in my opinion, when they signed Alexander Romanov to an 8-year contract worth $6.25 million per year. As of right now, according to Hockey Statcars, he's graded out as one of the worst defensemen on the Islanders by a fair margin. When you go on a per-game basis, his average game score is the 3rd worst among all defensemen in the NHL, ahead of only the defensive disasters of Logan Mailloux and Nick Leddy. The Islanders fans, those 7 years are going to fly right by. But Romanov was not the worst contract signed last offseason. It belongs to a contract that most of us immediately chuckled at and has only aged worse from there. Trent Frederick signing with the Edmonton Oilers for 8 years and $3.85 million per has been a disaster, as we all expected. And although Frederick isn't as bad as Romanov on a game-to-game basis, his net rating among forwards is one of the worst in the NHL, and with a negative 3.1 offensive rating, he is basically killing the Oilers in their offensive zone, worn out by the fact that he has just 1 goal and 0 assists on the year. He's been absolutely atrocious this year, and like with Romanov, just 7 more years to endure for the Oilers. While these contracts are looking pretty terrible, there were some contracts that were signed that are aging really well, and one that I was not as high on in the offseason but has proven to be very good so far is the New York Rangers, who signed Vlad Gavrikov away from the LA Kings, ironically, for admittedly a pretty big number, $7 million per year for 7 years. And while Gavrikov hasn't been any sort of an offensive dynamo, only 1 goal and 3 points on the year, he has been one of the best defensemen in the NHL, according to Hockey Statcars, the highest rated defensive defenseman, and a bright spot on the New York Rangers backline so far. Now, the 4th best contract that was signed last offseason is one that I loved when it happened. Even though fans of the Toronto Maple Leafs were willing to move on from a lot of the core, I thought that re-signing John Tavares to a 4-year contract worth just over $4 million a year was a great value add, and he has proven that so far. He is still a very high-end number 2 center, 7 goals and 18 points so far this year. He's been more than adequate defensively. And even though he is a little bit on the older side and this contract still has another 3 years on it, I think it will still age very well for the Leafs. Now, the 3rd best contract signed last offseason belongs to the New York Islanders, and while they whiffed on Romanov, they made a pretty shrewd move signing one of the throw-in parts to the Noah Dobson trade, Emil Heineman, to a 2-year contract worth $1.1 million per year, and Heineman's way out producing that so far this year. I know his hockey stat card ratings aren't exactly anything to write home about, but 5 goals and 8 points for a guy making just over $1 million a year for the next 2 years, he'll take that every day. Now, the second best contract signed last offseason belongs to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have surprised everybody, and nobody has been more shocking than the emergence of Justin Brazeau, who got signed to what seemed like an insignificant 2-year, $3 million deal for $1.5 million AAV. Brazeau has, of course, been way outperforming that meager salary with 6 goals and 12 points so far this year, and while that might not be sustainable, the underlying analytics are really good for him, and he is the 3rd highest rated player on the Pittsburgh Penguins this year behind only Malkin and Carlson. He's ahead of Tang and Crosby. And finally, the best contract signed last offseason, and I called it at the time, the Avalanche getting Brent Burns for 1 year and $1 million was just absolute steal in terms of value. I don't care that he's 40, he's still a borderline top 4 defenseman, and he has definitely been that this year. 1 goal and 6 points so far. He's been the Avalanche's 3rd highest rated defenseman on the year so far. Still been an absolute beast this year, and let this be a lesson to all the other NHL teams. This is how you build a championship, by getting undervalued assets just because they might be a little bit older for very cheap. And that signing, among others, is why teams like the Avalanche continue to be Stanley Cup threats year in and year out.